Well, hello and welcome along to another edition of the Andrew Eborn Show, where I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Armstrong. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm very good, thank you, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I love the discs behind you. What's that? 1 million discs. What was that for?
That was one of my older records. And this, I'd like to tell the truth, but really, it's not. I'm actually at our office, where the whole office is adorned with various gold discs and accolades for Lisa, mainly for her work back in the days when artists did sell 1 million copies and 500,000. I think they give you gold discs now for about 5,000.
I think it's 5,000 likes. I think they do it now, don't they? It works on that. No, the industry certainly changed. It's extraordinary. And what I love about this, Michael, is I have lots of musicians in these extraordinary times come on the show and talk about their lives and their influences and how they got started. And virtually all of them say they came from a musical family. But you didn't, did you?
Not at all. No. I don't know where the talent, if you like, came from, musical talent. My parents, they loved music. I mean, they're children of the 60s. You know, my mum saw the Beatles in 64 or something when she was 14 or something, I don't know. And so they had a good old record collection, a good vinyl record collection. But and there was always kind of music on in the car, on the cassette tapes. Do you remember them? And my brother and I would sing along in harmony. We didn't know what that was, but we'd sing along in the back seat. And Thursday night,
the Beatles as well, because as you talked about the Beatles and what an influence they've been on your life and your music, and one of your idols, Paul McCartney, will come on to him in a bit. But you used to sing doing the harmonies to old Beatles tracks, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'd sit there singing along, and as I say, like Thursday nights were a huge thing, because that was Top of the Pops night, when you could actually see the people that you were hearing on the radio. And Sunday afternoons was the top 40 countdown, where you'd illegally record it, of course, so you could listen to it in the car. And you know, I feel like an old man saying this now, but kids don't know what they got, because now you can instantly see and you can talk to your musical heroes and idols, or a lot of them. So yeah, times have certainly moved on.
Extraordinary. I mean, so you were born in South London in November 1973. You're growing up with all this music around you, although your family's not musical. And you've got your first guitar when you were 11. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I tried guitar lessons at school, I think probably when I was about 9, classical guitar lessons, and I didn't get on with it, probably a bit too young. My hands weren't quite big enough. But I was drawn towards music. And just wanted to play. And I started out as a drummer, actually, and I became a fairly good drummer, but I couldn't write songs on the drums. You know, they all sound the same. You know, so I needed an instrument, and guitar was my choice. And so my parents bought me an electric guitar. I think it was a Marlin Slammer, 40 job from the catalogue,
right?
And the Little Woods catalogue. And I got guitar lessons from a local teacher called Andy Brooks, who was a fabulous guy. I'm still friends with him today. And yeah, I began to then get the hang of it and pick it up. And I think probably within 3 months of having that guitar and being able to play a few chords, I started to write songs. Not very good ones, but I started to write songs because I knew that was how I wanted to express myself.
Yeah, so three chords and you're off and you're writing, which is great. I love it. You also started piano, didn't you? And in order to get out of games, you didn't like rugby very much, so you thought you could use that and learn a bit of piano.
Yeah, that was probably a couple of years later. I'm about 13. I go to Rutlish High School in Wimbledon, and it was a rugby school, real old-fashioned rugby school. And you know, I'm a huge sports fan. I love watching sports, especially football and rugby. But I'm not a fan of being wet, muddy and cold. And I'm even less of a fan of getting hurt. I'm a coward. I don't mind admitting it. I can't think of anything worse than being out on a cold, wet day with some guy running at you, wanting to hurt you. I mean, well, why would you do that? So my complete lack of ability was clear to my teachers, my games teachers. And so it was just kind of mutually agreed. I don't remember having a discussion, but it was just, probably just one day I didn't go and I stayed in the music room, and a discussion must have taken place between the teachers. And they said, I'll just let him stay there. He's happier there. There's no point in him being out here. He's useless. where he's actually doing some good in the music room, in the music kind of block. And so I taught myself to play the piano. I had like a little piano room there, and I'd listen to Beatles songs and Billy Joel and songs of the day. And I kind of taught myself to play a form of piano. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't want to try and teach anyone because it's my own kind of pigeon form. But again, similar with the guitar, all I ever wanted to do was accompany my voice and to tell a story. So I didn't want to be a virtuoso guitar player, not an Eric Clapton or a Jimi Hendrix, and not a Chopin on the piano or anything. This was just about being able to accompany a voice that I knew I had.
And it's great on that. And what I loved about it is your teachers were, first of all, even though it was a rugby school and they're very proud of their rugby, they actually encourage you to do music, so much so they encourage you to enter a competition, a songwriting competition for Pebble Mill at One. Tell us about that.
Yeah, wow, that was I think that was a Christmas song. I can't remember the year, but it was definitely at that high school. So I remember the teacher, Mr. Ellis was the music teacher.
It was 1988, I can tell you. It was 1988.
Oh, thank you very much. There you go.
So I know more about your life than you do.
Most people do. Yeah, and they obviously, the teachers knew I wrote songs. I was recording songs by then, on like a little 4-track and things. So I was, very, very proud of that, and probably I think I had a little band together at school as well. And so this competition came up, and they suggested it to me and maybe a couple of others, and I entered the competition. And yeah, I mean, eventually I ended up coming second in the competition, which meant that I didn't get to go to Pebble Mill One, but it meant that my name, I think, came up on the screen on the day. And I didn't think any more of it. And many years later, I was reading Gary Barlow's autobiography. Big fan of Gary Barlow. I love Take That and their songs, and my wife even more so. So she's got me into them. And I was reading his autobiography, and suddenly he talked about his big break coming in 1988 when he won a songwriting competition and got to go and perform it on Pebble Mill at One. And I was completely knocked sideways because I hadn't actually I thought I'd forgotten about it. And when I read that, I thought, that was me. I did that. I was there second. So I was beaten by Gary Barlow, which is, I can take that, I think.
I can take that. Boom, boom. I love it. You write your own stuff as well. A career in comedy is certainly ahead. It's got to be fun. And it is interesting because a lot of people who don't necessarily win the competitions go on to great things. We take One Direction, for example. They didn't win. And lots of others. So to come second to Gary Barlow ain't so bad. And he features quite a bit in your life as well, which again we'll sort of come on to. But you started doing your own band and when you were 18, you started touring and that sort of stuff. What sort of material were you playing?
We were playing my songs. It was. I always wanted to play my own music, and so when I, certainly with the band going out and playing, like these were like venues for people to come and see new music. So yeah, I was playing my own songs, some of which have ended up on subsequent albums, I think, probably one or two. And occasionally you had to play a few covers and things, obviously, to get by. If you want to play in pubs and things, people don't want to hear your deep and meaningful song they've never heard before for an hour and a half. You've got to throw a few in. So the inevitable Beatles songs and a bit of Bowie, a bit of Take That. So yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is very different because when you are on a stage where an audience come and pay to see you, you are the attraction. When you're in a pub, so often you're a bit of background music while they drink their beer, aren't they?
Yeah, it's completely different. You've got to play songs people recognise, and there's fantastic bands out going around doing that. And I've done it a lot, as any musician I think has done, but it's absolutely not where my heart was or where my heart is. It's because it's all about telling my own stories for me.
Yeah, but you managed to do you did some gigs at the Empire, the Shepherd's Bush Empire, just up the road from me. Tell me about those. How did they come about?
Just from playing other smaller venues, we began to pick up a bit of a following, as you do. And I think it was a promoter called Pete Feenstra who ran, I think it was what's called the Bottom Line, which was next door to the Shepherd's Bush Empire. I think it's become a Australian bar. Last time I was there, I think it was probably 10 years.
Bars anymore. They will come back. Yes, at the moment.
Right, yeah. And so we played there, and we pulled in a decent crowd. And he said, "Okay, well, next step is to come and play the Empire. How do you feel about supporting?" I think the first gig was the Counterfeit Stones,
Right.
who are basically a Rolling Stones copycat group, but have made a fantastic living out of it. I mean, and toured the world. I remember we spotted them there, and I remember chatting to them backstage. And one of the guitarist had been was a lawyer, and he'd given that up to go on the road.
Right.
And the drummer had been like a city trader or something, and they'd given it up because they were earning a great living doing this. And they really got into character as well, let me tell you. I mean, when they had some fun backstage before they went on stage. So they lived the life.
Yes, so both on stage and off stage, that they look to behave like Stones. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a real life.
Yeah, but that's becoming a regular thing. And I think what's interesting, Michael, is that when you start to get that, it gets interesting and you start to get adulation from the crowd, you're developing a crowd, but you became a bit disillusioned with it. Why was that?
Well, I mean, the toughest thing is to play somewhere like the Shepherd's Bush Empire, which we did on several occasions, and then the following week to be playing at a bar in Harlesden with your mum and dad. And my mum and dad came everywhere, let me tell you. And it's disheartening, and it's hard to keep going that way, and you feel like you're doing something wrong, and so you need to make changes. And also when you're in a band, this band was of 4 people, so you're trying to keep 4 people happy, and 4 people are trying. We're on the cusp of our lives, really. By now we're 20, 21 years old. We have girlfriends, in some cases wives, and we have real life looming on the horizon. They want, just children and the property market and things like this. So I think you've got to have a real grit and determination to carry on as a group of people, and we probably didn't have that. And so as a band, we fell apart. And my dad, as my parents have said, were really supportive. My dad ran a building company in London, and after a couple of months of me sitting at home writing songs, growing my hair long, and generally being a bit of a dropout, he said, "Okay, well, while you're following your musical dreams, you better earn some money too, and get up in the mornings." And so he said I should go and work for him. And I think I did a couple of weeks as a labourer, and soon my utter no talent for that came shone through again, because once again
I was getting, days again, isn't it? Physical activity, Michael Armstrong, they just don't live together.
Don't go together. Asking me to stand outside in the cold and wet and lift heavy things, it's not my bag, man. And so he brought me into the office, and I excelled there, and he taught me how to basically taught me accountancy. So I became an accountant, as well as management, because my dad wasn't never a physical builder. He was just a manager of other people, telling them, he was a very clever guy. And we had a really, really successful 10 or 15 years doing that. And all that while, I was still writing songs, I was still recording songs, and I was getting better and better. And I was going out and performing every now and then. But real life had taken over. I had a mortgage, I had 3 children, I was married, and I'd probably settled for what I had at that stage, perhaps.
Yeah, and when it was 15 years in the construction business, you helped grow your father's company to a very successful business. And you talk about yourself being happy. You have your wife, you have your 3 children. It's a different lifestyle. But then in 2011, father's health declined. You had a bit of a health scare yourself. Tell me about that.
Well, my dad, we worked really hard, and I'd met Lisa, who was later to become my manager, and things started to happen to me in the music there completely organically without having planned it. And Lisa and I went up to Liverpool to meet a guy she'd introduced me to, who wanted to produce an EP with me, a 3-track EP.
This is the legendary, I should put this in context, this is the legendary Lisa Davies, who I think you once described either the world's greatest groupie or a music guru, I think you described her once as, which is, but she is legendary. Lisa Davies has been in the industry for a long time, looks after lots of great people and does wonderful things for them and for her as well. How did you meet her?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, backpedaling there a little bit. Lisa, there's various stories flying around, but the true story is that I used to play in a covers band when I was about 17, 18 with some who were older guys. I hadn't seen them for 20 years. Bumped into one of them at a wedding of a mutual friend who said, oh, we're playing in another band again. Do you want to come along? I came down. It was Lisa's house I was brought to. And Lisa was playing in this band. And as I said, I walked into her house and there were these gold discs and things on the wall. And as I said, I thought, well, either she's a serious music business person or a serial groupie. And either way, I can't lose.
No, brilliant. So you then had that discussion. How did the discussion evolve about Lisa managing you?
That didn't really happen. I mean, it was weird. I obviously we played in the band, and I gave her a CD of my stuff. I said, you might want to listen to this. And obviously being Lisa gets a lot of CDs from a lot of people. And so I didn't hear anything. And then I think they went to Portugal, her and her husband, Charles, a couple of months later, and took the CDs with them that had been left just because that's the place where they listen to music. And Charles, her husband, put my CD on and ended up listening to it for the whole 2 weeks they were there. Absolutely loved it. And then they put two and two together and realised it was me who played in the band. And Lisa came back and said, wow, we love your music. Let's try and do something. So the management thing hadn't really happened then, but that was when she introduced me to this Liverpudlian guy called Steve Dinwoody, who wanted to produce the EP. So just mixing the two stories, we ended up going to Liverpool and we had a great night with this guy. And I was so excited that we were going to make this CD up there. And I thought, wow, you know, things are really beginning to happen for me. And then I got a phone call saying my dad had a heart attack. So it was completely that I was so excited and then brought crashing down to earth. Like, I can't even begin to imagine. And I said, I need to go home. And so we drove back from Liverpool to London. Not quite sure how I managed it, but I did it. And I went to see my dad in hospital, and thankfully he was fine. It was a pretty major one, and he had 3 or 4 stents put in. But he's been all right, and he's still all right to this day. So that was the start of the kind of work beginning to crumble. My dad was ill. I'd started to get this interest in my own music. I had a bit of a health scare myself, but my dad really didn't want to carry on the music, the construction business anymore. He'd had enough, and I didn't want him to carry on, you know, because he clearly his health was suffering from it, because it's a stressful job running your own company with having, you know, 20 odd employees or whatever. So we began to wind it down, and at the same time, my kind of EP that we recorded in Liverpool became successful. And so I set about recording an album. And in order to do that, I needed to be doing it full time. So I took the risk of closing the business and of taking a year off and saying, okay, I've got a year, I've got enough savings for my family and I to live on, and for me to record this album. I give myself a year to do it. And a year later, I was about halfway through the album and I'd run out of money, and which is a problem when you got a mortgage, 3 kids and a wife. And I'd kind of been helping Lisa out with various things. And so Lisa said, okay, well, why don't you come and work for me for a couple of days a week, and I'll kind of manage you, but you can help me out at the office. And so that kind of relationship developed, and that enabled me to finish the first album and cemented the kind of relationship with Lisa.
And what I love, it must have taken you ages and ages and ages to come up with the title for your first album.
Yes, imaginatively entitled Michael Armstrong. Although I have to say that was completely against my wishes. Because I didn't want it to be Mike, because I'm the same as you. I thought that's really boring. I'm a Pink Floyd fan and a Supertramp fan, and all these, you know, Steely Dan, all these wild and wonderful things. And there's a track on that album called The Cola Paranoia.
Love it. I love it.
I wanted it to be called The Cola Paranoia. And Keith Bessie, who produced it, and Lisa, who managed it, said, no, No. It's your first album. You've got to brand yourself. You've got to get your name out there and say it's Michael Armstrong. So you may criticise, but it wasn't my fault.
The CPLP would have been brilliant. People would have talked about this for years to come. I love it. No, but it's great. You are right to get the album out there, and a lot of people do that. Let's get the name out there, Michael Armstrong, and you see that sort of stuff. And you then started having champions, because you always, whenever you get an album out, it's your baby. You produced it. The first thing you do is to try and make sure you can get some radio play. And who better than Terry Wogan threatening to play Radio Years? And I can imagine those moments when you're waiting, and Terry's show, long show, you probably got all of the family round listening to it, and knowing Terry, having dropped it, he probably wouldn't play it till the last 10 minutes.
It wasn't in the last 10 minutes. It was the very, very last song he played. We'd been told he was going to play it. Again, you're 100% right. The whole family was there. We listened to his 2-hour show, and it's getting near and near the end, and I'm panicking and probably getting tearful, because it was that, I'm that passionate about it.
Embarrassing, isn't it? Everybody's listening. Oh, he's not going to be on. Yeah. What do you mean? You're not going to be a Terry Wogan? That's not going to happen.
And I think the show finished at 2:00, and at 1:57 he said, "And now we've got a song from." So huge relief and champagne all round.
But to finish the show, and it was superb. And Terry was a big fan, and a lovely man as well. When you first hear your song on the radio, and you've had that incredible journey, how did it make you feel?
Oh, just elated, I guess, justified, because I think you think you're good, and you think you can stand up. You think your music can stand up to the other music out there, but you don't really know. You might be deluded. In my job here, I get a lot of people who are deluded, and you only have to watch the talent show things to see the deluded people. So maybe I'm hearing something different to someone else. But when Terry Wogan plays it, you're following the Eagles or whatever it was that came on before me, or Robbie Williams, then you think, okay, that I was right. It stands up. I was justified to take a gamble, really, which is because that's what I did. I took a huge gamble on everything to stick to.
It is that sort of roller coaster of emotion, isn't it? Because by the time you've been through the health scares with your father, with your own health scare, you've been jobbing and this sort of stuff, given up the work, all that sort of stuff, worried, a family, 3 kids, how are you going to support them? You've told the family, big moment, this is your big moment, and you've got the embarrassment it may not even be played. I can feel that. This is the stuff of great drama. You've got your Jeopardy in and everything. The great thing about the Radio Years, it then went on to be a top 10 in several countries around the world, didn't it?
It did, yes. Most surprisingly, Peru, I think, was the first one.
You and Paddington are big in Peru. We love that.
Absolutely, yeah. I still haven't managed to get over there, but I do communicate with quite a few DJs who played it and who helped me out. So, that's it's your first single. I mean, what more could you possibly ask for? Incredible.
No, fantastic. And it then led to, obviously, you doing your own shows, and you were working with lots of other artists. You had Leo Sayer, to Powell, Beverly Craven. Talk to me about those sort of times.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. I think I've been touring with, Lisa and I kind of put our own tour together with Peter Howarth, who's the lead singer of the Hollies, and we were doing like an acoustic show. Yeah. And that had been really successful, and it helped grow my audience. And then I think the first one that came along was Leo Sayer. And I was a huge Leo fan. I've got his greatest hits album, and I had it for a long time, and it's just fantastic songs and a great singer. And so that was really exciting for me. Excuse me. And I think he had a 36-date tour or something. This was 2015, latter part of 2015, the autumn. And it was like 36 dates over 42 days or something. And we called it the Star of David tour, because there was no logical. It didn't start in Southampton, go to Scotland. It went like this all over the country. And but it was such, this was me going, the first time I'd really been on the road. It's everything I'd read about, everything I'd dreamed about, and I'm opening for this superstar. I'm walking out into, I think the second night was something like Manchester, something or the other. I come out, it was like 1,400 people or something like that. And I walk out and I'm just by myself because I was doing the solo slot. And then his band would come on. So it's just me telling stories about my music and playing music in front of all these people. And you don't know how it's going to go, but you could hear a pin drop. They hung on every word. They laughed at the right times. They applauded at the right times. And I walked, after I finished, it was the interval, and I'd go out the interval, and there'd be a queue of people waiting to buy a CD and to have a chat. And that happened for 36 nights. And it was just one of the great periods of my life, really. It was fantastic.
And it's a great way of learning, isn't it? Because you also learn from the professionals. There are various people in the industry who are very giving of their time. They give advice and you can learn from them. I mean, talk to me about some of the others, because you work with T'Pau, Beverly Craven, as you say as well. How were they?
T'Pau was great. Again, T'Pau was a funny one because the first band I ever saw live was T'Pau when I was 14. I had a real crush on...
Carol's brilliant. She is such a character. I love Carol.
I had a real crush on Carol Decker as a 14-year-old. And so I persuaded my mum and dad. I think it was both albums. 2 albums had been out by the time I saw them in '88 again. And my parents took me. And so to then get a phone call from Carol Decker, and it was a phone call from her. She called me, "Hi, it's Carol Decker," to discuss some promotion to go on tour with them, was just real coming full circle for me. And I did a deal with Carol that I ended up being in the band as well, T'Pau. Right. Just because she needed some extra hands. So I ended up going, I was the support act. I'd do my solo thing. I'd come out, I'd sign my CDs, I'd go back in, I'd change my shirt, and then I'd come back on stage with T'Pau. And I played percussion and did backing vocals for the band. So that was just crazy. It was like working 2.5 hours a night. And you certainly, as you say, it's a real learning curve. You become your singing voice, and it gets so much better. If you're singing every night like that, you'd worry that it goes the opposite, that you'd actually begin to lose your voice. But as long as you look after yourself to a certain extent, that muscle becomes so strong, and you improve so much as a singer and as an all-round entertainer, because you know how to work the crowd. So working with T'Pau was fabulous. Beverly Craven, again, did a fantastic show with her at the Epsom Playhouse, which is kind of my local theatre, if you like. So I had a load of friends and family come down for that. So that was really lovely. And she's a lovely, lovely lady. We had such fun. And Dean Friedman, I did a couple of tours with him. American, amazing singer-songwriter. Dean is very underrated. He's an incredible. Even his last album, for example, a couple of years ago, was fantastic. Doesn't sell like his early ones in the 70s. But a fabulous guy and an incredible storyteller and an incredible songwriter. So I learned an awful lot from him as well.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the music industry, because people are incredibly generous. And in amongst all this time, you've effectively got a parallel career then, because you're working with Lisa, you're dealing with the PR side and so on and so forth, as well as got your own compositions and your own touring, over 200 songs, phenomenal. Tell me about the Queen's Jubilee concert in 2012, because this I have to say is the biggest smile on my face when I heard about this, because this is the glorious fusion of you with a sort of PR hat on and you with a musician, and the two wonderfully collided in a Venn diagram sort of way. Tell me about that.
Yeah, you're completely right. Wow, what a couple of days that was. This is 2013 Queen's Jubilee concert at Buckingham Palace.
2012, the 4th of June.
Oh, thank you. Well done. Okay. You do know more. So, one of the clients that Lisa represents, and by association, so do I, because I work with Lisa, is Cliff Richard. Yeah. And of course, any sort of national celebration, and Cliff's going to be there, because he's he's a fabulous guy for starters. A lovely man, but he's also, the most successful solo British artist of all time. So he's got to be there. And so Cliff was performing at the concert, and we knew that everyone else would be. And Lisa managed to get me a pass as well. I'm not quite sure how, but she did, because it was all very hush-hush. But she insisted she needed my help. And so we went there the first couple of days were like rehearsals. And the first thing we do is we go into like this marquee where the dressing rooms are kind of laid out into their own kind of little separate booths. And there's Cliff. We found Cliff's dressing room and look up, and next door it says Paul McCartney. And then it says Elton John and Stevie Wonder. And you just walk down in a straight line. It was Gary Barlow, Shirley Bassey, Kylie Minogue, Robbie Williams, Tom Jones, Ed Sheeran. And I was like, okay, this is going to be an interesting couple of days. And so we did our stuff with Cliff, and I spoke to the organisers, and I found out that McCartney was going to. McCartney's my hero, so McCartney was going to sound check the next morning. So we didn't really need to be there till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was there at 8 a.m. Right, and I stood out there, and McCartney's band came out, and they were playing, and then McCartney came along, in his kind of tracksuit and glasses, and his sound checks are legendary. I mean, he played for about 45 minutes, Beatles tracks, Wings tracks, new material, jumping between guitar, bass and piano. And I think there were 4 or 5 of us watching. And I was singing along to every word at the top of my voice, bang in front of him as close as I could get. Yeah, I filmed it and everything. I was in ecstasy, And that finished, and we walked back along to where the dressing rooms were, hoping that he might appear. And he did. He appeared, and he looked across, and he came walking over to me, and he said, "Hey, hi, I'm Paul." I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Michael." And we had a chat. He'd obviously seen me singing along, and he had a photograph, and he was just so wonderfully generous with his time. And when he got in his car and drove off, I broke down. It was the most emotional experience I'd ever had, because, apart from having my children, darling, because this was just, I just met a Beatle. I'd idolized this guy since I was 7 years old. And then that wasn't the end of it. The weekend went on, and because he was next door, I hung out with him quite a bit. He was chatting, and we spoke about things. I gave him a CD of mine, which he and the final kind of moment came. McCartney was headlining, and we were all kind of standing backstage, because the final song that McCartney played on the day was Obla Di, Obla Da. And as he kind of went into that song, all the artists of the day were to join him on the stage. So I'm kind of standing backstage, and in he goes to the track, and someone walks on Stevie Wonder, and Cliff goes on, and Elton John, and Kylie Minogue, and Tom Jones, and they're all walking out one by one. And I'm a little bit devilish, I can't deny it. And the very last people to walk onto the stage were the military wives. There was about 30 of them, all dressed in black, and I had a black jacket on. And I just thought, well, it's now or never. So I just joined the military wives, and I walked out onto stage, and I sang in front of an audience of 1 billion people, I think, with McCartney, and with probably just about every other rock star in the world. I sang Obla Di, Obla Da, and I was giving it some so my mum could see on television, And that was just fabulous until the song ended. And now I'm stuck on the stage, probably some sort of security threat, without a doubt, as the Queen and Prince Charles and everyone else come on to do their speech. And I can't get off. And they do their speech, and then they come around and they are introduced to all the people standing there. And the Queen comes along, and I'm introduced to her as one of the members of the military wives. And she doesn't bat an eyelid. She shakes my hand and she moves on.
Oh, brilliant. So whereabouts were you? Because I remember that so well. That fantastic, packed out in the Mall, as they say, on the 4th of June 2012. And we had Elton John. He was dancing with Cliff, where you can see those glorious moments, and all the stars on stage. Whereabouts were you in that group? The military wives. Who were the stars next to you apart from the military wives?
Oh goodness, I think I was mainly surrounded by the military wives. I know that Elton come up. The military wife who was standing next to me got really emotional, and she was crying, and he come up and started hugging her. And I was thinking, he's going to hug me next. Let's get a hug from Elton. But I kind of if you're viewing it on the television, it was on the left, and you can't really see me on the television, which I was a little bit disappointed about. But once the Queen come on, I manoeuvred myself to like the centre, so I'm standing with Paul McCartney's drummer, Abe, which is like centre stage, and just trying to see what was going on and make myself clear. And I still couldn't really make myself out on television. But 3 days later, OK magazine came out, and someone called me up and said, "You've got to look at the centre spread." And you opened it up, and there was a picture of the Queen and Cheryl Cole and Charles and I think Gary Barlow, and directly between them is my grin. Like,
and you must be grinning. You must still be grinning to this day. It's a glorious image. And as you say, Gary Barlow actually organised the whole thing. So your connection with Gary all the way back to your Pebble Mill days was wonderful.
Yeah.
But, well, another great image from that time was Ozzy Osbourne right next to Sir Rod Stewart and Kermit on his shoulder as he was meeting the Queen. I remember Sharon said to us that it was basically exactly that. She was waiting all this time to meet the Queen, and there was Ozzy with this green thing on his shoulder. Glorious, but great.
Brilliant.
But I love that, and that's what you have to have about the music industry. All of these, that rich tapestry of life, weave their ways into the music. And Paul McCartney, we talked about sort of special people. You met your hero. In your pocket, you had the cover of Abbey Road, which you never got signed because you couldn't sum up the courage.
Yeah, I deeply regret that. Don't know why I didn't. It just seemed crass or inappropriate because I guess because I was there on a professional level in a way, but because
wife. You know, military wives don't do that sort of stuff. They're used to.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, but I don't know. I just don't know why I didn't do it. I wish I had done. I regret that one for sure.
I thought Paul is a regular on this show. He always watches. I'm sure we're going to sign a copy of that for you somewhere. We're surprising when it's your birthday and coming up in November, so it should be fun. But didn't the military wives, when you were there though, Michael, didn't the military wives say, "Who's that?" Did they not question it?
No, they didn't say a thing. Actually, they probably thought I was. I don't know. They just assumed I was someone who was meant to be there. I guess
you're a wife, obviously. I mean, I don't think.
They just thought I was in the wrong section, I guess.
I love it. There's brilliant stuff. But afterwards as well, because Sir Paul is a wonderful chap. He's one of the most generous people in the business. He spends a lot of time with everybody. But what I love about this business is they're all human, and he would have his grandson with him. And I know his grandson was a big fan of It's Not Unusual. He's a big fan of Sir Tom, wasn't he? Tell me about that.
That was wonderful. That was before the actual, between the sound check and the main concert, Paul's family had obviously come to watch it. So he walked into the dressing room and he had his grandson holding his hand. And at the time, The Voice, the television show The Voice, which had been on for a series. It was really big, I think. And Tom Jones was obviously one of the guests, one of the presenters or the judges, whatever. And the kid walked in and he sort of looked at it and he tugged Paul McCartney and he said, Granddad, it's Tom Jones. It's like, yeah, do you want me to introduce you? He said. So I took him over to him. I just loved that. I thought you're holding the hand of the most famous person in the world, and he's awestruck that he's seen Tom Jones.
I know, it's not unusual, as they say. Always, yeah. But no. So Tom's great as well, and you're surrounded by knights that day. And Sir Paul's great. He's got 8 grandchildren, but all of them to him, he's granddad, isn't he?
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So, with Stella and Mary, his 2 daughters and things like that, was incredible. So a great night. That must have been, going back to your day job the following day, must have felt a bit strange, didn't it?
Yeah. Do you know what? The following day was weird. I was actually going on a holiday. Me and the wife and kids, we were going to Spain for a couple of weeks, if I remember rightly, and we were flying out at 3:30 in the morning. So I think I got back about 2:20 in the morning, and there was no way I was going to sleep. I was just so excited. So I literally just picked them up and got on a plane. I remember that. I can remember it distinctly. Every time I laid down on the sunbed and closed my eyes, I could see McCartney, and I could recall every single word of our conversations that we had. You know, it's there, no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, one of the highlights, and it is, there's that wonderful rush of adrenaline, and then you're back, but your own career is obviously taking up at the same time. You've then got your first album out. You came on to the second with a hashtag. Talk to me about, was that deliberate? When you were sort of in the days of the hashtag? I love it. It's well worth it. Looking for the world hashtag.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of, I call it an album with a concept, but it's not a concept album, I think is what I described it as. And it's very much an album about two people. Warren Bennett co-produced it and co-wrote many of the songs with me. And Warren's a fantastic musician and composer in his own right, and we had so much fun making that album, and both weirdly enjoy the same music. I mean, even to the point where he'd say something obscure and I'd say yeah, or he'd say I went to a concert and say I was there. You know, you just couldn't believe that these two people had such synergy in effect. So there was, and the album was kind of, it's a really great album. I'm so proud of it, and it's very retro in a sense, as all my music is, because of the influences that I have. But it was also very like a comment on the times as well, if you like, in a retro kind of way. And so hashtag Looking for the World is one of there's the single off it and one of the tracks on it. And hashtag Looking for the World just was like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, because it's not modern at all. You know, hashtag is like the modern thing. So that was just kind of a bit of a side joke, I think.
No, but a great way to do it, and you did all that sort of stuff, and you carry on performing and more success. And just immediately prior to that, you obviously did the 60th anniversary of the Cavern Club, which is again your whole sort of connection with the Beatles and that sort of stuff. The official was 2016, just before your album launch. How did that come about?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I came through a couple called Debbie and Nigel Greenberg, who I met at I was in Liverpool. I spent a lot of time in Liverpool, and I went to a classical guitar recital of Beatles songs in Penny Lane, a church in Penny Lane, which is, of course, in the song. And I met this. We went to the gallery afterwards.
What song's it in, Michael?
In Penny on the.
So, hey, you were going to tell me, weren't you?
I was going to tell you. You got me there.
It was in
Actually, I don't think the church is in it, but yeah, it's a Beatles song. You must have heard them.
Oh yeah, really? Okay, good.
We went to a gallery afterwards for some drinks after the kind of recital, and I met this couple. And it turned out that Debbie had grown up in the Cavern Club. Her dad owned it during its heyday in the 60s. And so she was a teenager working or growing up in the Cavern Club when all these bands were playing there. I mean, what a moment in time that must have been, you know, for a young girl. And funnily enough, although they didn't know each other, Nigel, who was then her husband, actually ran the recording studio upstairs and next door kind of thing. So many of them, the stars of the day, had been in and out and recorded there. And basically, I got to know them, and Debbie gave me played me a track that her dad had wrote for her at the time and given to her as a Christmas present. And I think it was called, I can't remember what it was originally called. It might have been called Little Girl. It might have been called whatever. But he'd written this song for her, and it was and recorded it. And it was very kind of 50s, 60s, that kind of vibe, that kind of Christmas song. And it was a beautiful song. And she said, if you could ever do anything with it, you know, I'd be very honoured. I said, okay, that's very kind. And I sort of kind of forgotten about it. And then when I was recording Looking for the World with Warren, once again, we realised we were completely behind schedule, and we were going to be a year later than what we'd actually planned, because the idea was to get the album recorded in about 3 months, and it took us about 18 months in the end, probably because we were giggling most of the time. But I realised that we thought it would be good to have a stopgap and get something out for Christmas. And Warren is an even bigger Beatles fan than I am. You know, he's like a world expert on it. And I said to him, do you know what? I remembered this song I got from Nigel and Debbie that's kind of ties in with the whole 60s thing. Do you want to have a listen to it? And I dug it out and I played it to him. And we just kind of literally there and then, we got the guitars out and we kind of rewrote it, put a new chorus in and just kind of updated it a bit. And we thought, you know, this is really cool. And so I think I sent a demo or something to Nigel and Debbie and said, look, that song you gave me a year ago, we're thinking of doing something with it this Christmas. You know, do you mind? We've kind of jigged it around a bit. And she came back and said, oh, no, I absolutely love it. It's great. And it also happens to be the Cavern's 60th birthday. And I'm writing a book about my times there. So we thought, well, that's a coincidence. You know, everything kind of comes together separately without any of us thinking about what the other was doing. And so, yeah, we recorded that. And because of their connection with the Cavern, they spoke to the Cavern and they agreed for it to be their 60th anniversary song. And we went up there and we filmed the video and we played at the Cavern stage, and we performed the song and some other kind of 60s classics at like a little launch for it. And, you know, it just kind of further cemented my links to Liverpool and to that, you know, the Beatles connection and all that. And I guess forever ties me to it now. So again, incredibly proud of it.
Absolutely. So looking at the Cavern Club, and this is what I love. You've got McCartney running through that sort of thing. You've got Gary Barlow running through your career. You've got the bluster and the I'll get in there, whatever happens, running through the career. Because it's all about opportunities, isn't it? And this is why, for me, you epitomise what a singer-songwriter performer should be, because you need to take all of those opportunities. You're meeting people here, it leads to other things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all about who you know, more often than not, and taking those opportunities. It's about taking risks, which isn't always the smartest thing to do, but if you're that ambitious, which I am, or I certainly was, perhaps I'm mellowing as I get older, which I think happens, then you'll stop at nothing really, and which can be dangerous. So I wouldn't advise it. But you know, you just got to take the opportunities, and you have to. What I didn't do, and I think what I do now, is that I appreciate what I've done. You know, because you can be. That's kind of what the song "Looking for the World" was about. The song says, "Stop looking for the world," because although I kind of done all those things, I wasn't happy. I thought I hadn't done enough, and I wasn't happy inside until I realised I had to look back and say, "Stop looking for the world. You don't have to have everything. You've done a lot. You know, appreciate what you've done and enjoy what you've got." And I've learned to do that as I've got older, I think.
Yeah, and what's great as well, Mike, is you write about it. I mean, all of your songs the majority tell a story. So this is really, you live your life in your work, over 200 songs, and it comes through on every one of the compositions. You can hear that tale being told.
Yeah, I'm a storyteller, but it's a storyteller from often telling the story of my life, and I think other people can relate to that because, you know, we're all living the same life. We're all going through the same ups and downs, really. You know, whether, you know, with just family life, and particularly at the moment with the situation we've all found ourselves in. So I have a way of telling it. I think there's a lot of humour in my songs because that's just the kind of character I am. I'm a bit cheeky, but there's also a lot of sensitivity and a great deal of honesty, like you said, perhaps too honest sometimes.
But you're right, it is that whole spectrum, if you like, of emotion, because that's what makes it real. Because it's not just here's another little love song and off we go and it's all very jolly, oobla-dee, oobla-da, we love, so it's all wonderful. Yeah. It is the tale when people are happy sometimes and they're sad sometimes and they have difficulties sometimes and family problems and health problems and things like that. If you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh? You know, you talk about human emotion, which is what I love. There's also a lot of nostalgia in there. There's a lot of feel. And you did the Great British Radio reunion as well, talking about nostalgia. Nostalgia ain't what it used to be. But how did that come about?
Yeah, that was great. They asked me to open that with the song "The Radio Years" for obvious reasons. I think I did an awful lot for both albums. I've done a lot of promo work, going around to, when you could, I would go and visit all the radio stations so I could develop a relationship with the producers and the DJs. I think that was perhaps a more advantageous thing than doing it just on the phone or ISDN. So I actually get to meet people, and it also helps in the promotion work that I do, of course, as well. So it's killing two birds with one stone. So I think one of the guys, I think it was Alex Dyke, who worked on BBC Radio Solent, still does, was playing my music a lot, did a couple of interviews with him. We got on really well. And he said, he organised that Great British Radio Reunion and just asked if I'd kick it off, which I very, very happily did. And he also set up a gig on the Isle of Wight for me. It was like wasn't the Isle of Wight concert. There was a big concert, lots of acts, and he invited me over there to play there. So he's been really a great supporter. Again, we spoke about that already. That's what you need. These guys.
Alex is great. He's down in Southampton and keeps looking out for those ships which are not there at the moment. But he's been really good. And who else was at the Great British Radio Reunion, and where did it take place?
Oh goodness, where was it? It was it one of those places in Camden, I think. I can't remember.
It was the Jazz Cafe. I was there that night. It was.
You there? Oh, okay.
Jazz Cafe, and I was there with Linda Lewis.
Okay, right, okay.
Yeah, and lots of, and you were great. You were fantastic. So
thank you very much.
It's good. I can remember these. I'll write your life story, and I'll remind you of the bits in between. But it's the Jazz Cafe. Great night. It was, and they had all sorts of people. So combination of live performances, combination of people telling stories. It's an interesting venue for those who haven't been, and hopefully when it reopens, because you have this sort of place downstairs, and the VIP thing, you have this sort of, you basically have to go up once like a really dangerous staircase to get upstairs. Do you remember?
I do, yes, yeah.
A lot of people, if they were late on in the performance, I think they found it a bit more difficult to get up and down. But we've got some interesting footage there somewhere. So it was the Jazz Cafe. It was a great night, and I loved it. And you were brilliant. I loved it. It was a really, really good start. You were touring then. We talked about the second album, Looking for the World, with a hashtag at the beginning. I love that. It was whilst you were touring that you met Ben Folds, isn't it? Talk to me about Ben.
Oh, wow. Well, Ben Folds, for me, is one of the great modern singer-songwriters, American singer-songwriters. I put him up there with Billy Joel. In fact, he kind of took over because Billy hasn't really done any new work since '92, I think, and Ben really took up the mantle from that. He was originally with the Ben Folds Five, kind of like a punk piano band, just like not quite punk, but I've always loved his music, and I just think he's got better and better as he's got older. He's had a classical #1. He's done a huge amount of work, film work, like children's work. There's so much. He's such a wonderful composer and one of my great musical influences and heroes. And I see him whenever he comes to the UK. And I was suddenly, again, one of these weird coincidences. 2018, I was given the opportunity to meet him and to spend a couple of days at a songwriting retreat in a beautiful, quaint little town called Ojai in California. And it wasn't just me. There was
7,534. It is tiny.
It is tiny.
It's glorious. I love Ojai. If you look at the pictures, it's rather like going into a movie set, isn't it?
It really is. It's idyllic. You know, I absolutely loved it. It's just a beautiful little place. And in California, you know, what could be better, you know? So yeah, I spent a few days, 4 or 5 days with Ben there and some other singer-songwriters, mostly North American. I was the only Brit there, a couple of Canadians, I think. And we just had a great time writing songs, sharing experiences, getting to know Ben, and enjoying the surroundings, really, yeah.
And Ben is a real character. Apart from all the music side, he's an avid photographer, and he's actually a member of the Sony Artisan of Imagery, a glorious title for that as well. And his work's been in the National Geographic and that sort of stuff. So fantastic. What I also love about Ben, he's a champion for education and also music therapy. And when we talk about that sort of big thing that we do over here with Nordorf Robbins, who, as you know, great charity, and people have seen the power of music, especially during lockdown, if you like, for mental health and so on and so forth. And we've had 2 great examples of that. One was the classical composer with Paul Harvey, if you remember, who had dementia. And he got to #1 in the charts as a result of the power of music. He composed this glorious piece, and he inspired someone to give him a £1 million donation, which was, so Tom Hunter gave a £1 million donation to help support dementia as a result of that. And the other great example, tying in with Ben as well, was the ballerina. You might remember that footage where she was locked in this world of darkness, shut off because she had dementia and all those difficult things. Marta Saldana was her name, a Spanish ballerina. And she basically used to be a prima ballerina, used to do Swan Lake. And they put the headphones on and they played to the piece. And I get goosebumps when I still picture it. And you could see her started doing all the movements.
Doing the movements.
Yeah. And wasn't that, and that for me was one of the glorious things. It was a Spanish initiative called Music to Awaken is what they call it. It doesn't sounds better in Spanish, but Music to Awaken was that initiative. But Ben, absolutely, Ben Folds, he does a lot of things. He's a big advocate for that sort of side. So spending time with him, we talk about influences on your music and your composing and the way that you think, that must have been quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible when he first walks into the room, kind of, you're having breakfast, and everyone's like, Ben Folds, and there's nothing of him. He's a tiny little guy, and but he's just, you know, he's one of these people you feel like you've known for ages. It makes you very relaxed, and he really is. I think he's a genius. I think he's incredible, and funnily enough, he did speak to us about the educational side of things and how he'd actually, you know, he'd been this. Before COVID, so he'd been non-stop touring, and he actually took on a different manager, and he said to his manager, you know, I only want to tour for 3 or 4 months a year because I want to dedicate the rest of it to education. And the guy was saying, well, you know, we need to make this amount of money, we need to do this. He said, no, I need, this is what I'm telling you I'm going to do. You know, I'm telling you, you're not telling me. I need this time off so I can do my other work with the education, with the classical head of whatever it was, whatever orchestra he runs in America and things like that. So he was very definite about splitting up his time and incredibly passionate about helping others. So yeah, just an incredible guy.
Yeah, so a wonderful time in Ojai, so inspirational in fact that you would name your, having done the Michael Armstrong album, I've just been to Ojai. Lucky it wasn't Bognor Regis, but I went to Ojai. Perhaps I'd call my album that. And what a year! What a year to release it. You know why? 5th of August, 2021. I'll give you an extra hook. It is their 100th anniversary. For Ojai is this year on the 5th of August 2021, because it was incorporated on the 5th of August, that sort of side, 1921, so 100 years. And
of course I knew that. That was the plan.
I could do this PR log. I could find you a hook. That'll be good. This is the Ojai album, and this is their centenary album. I love it.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that, and I'm so glad you told me. Yeah, I mean, while we were there in Ojai, and it truly was a life-changing experience for me. I honestly believe I came back a different person. But while I was there, I wrote songs, co-wrote some songs with some of the other guys. I finished songs. I've come back and I've written songs about it, about the experience. And so it just seemed like a great idea, or the only idea, to call the album Ojai. And I also have to say that I'm a huge fan of the Steely Dan album Aja, which is spelled A-J-A, and people call it Aja. No one, until you actually listen to the song, you're not sure how to pronounce it. And so I thought this would be my own Asia. So people call it Ojai, and God knows what it's actually Ojai, and you don't know that until you hear the song. So yeah, a couple of reasons for that, and of course because they're 100 years old.
See, I told you, this will be part of a narrative from now on, which is what I love. And it's a fantastic album. I love it. It's what they call Yacht Rock on the sort of West Coast sound. I mean, all of the influences that you talk about, you talked about Fleetwood Mac, you talk about Criss Cross, you talk about Steely Dan and that sort of stuff. It all comes through in this album, doesn't it?
Yeah, I probably has done in every album. I think I because I want to make music that I want to listen to, and the bands you mentioned and others are what I want to listen to. So I think that inevitably comes across. So that it's always very much Michael Armstrong too, the kind of perhaps with the lyrics and the wit perhaps. But yeah, this album particularly because I was in Ojai and I was writing the songs there, and you can't help but be influenced by your surroundings. by how you feel. You know, I'm on the West Coast. I'm on the West Coast of America. You know, California, which is where it all happened for me. You know what I mean? Starting, with the Beach Boys, and then the whole Laurel Canyon adventures and sound. You know, that's the music that I really love, and to finally find myself there for the purpose of writing music was an incredible experience. And I think as you say, I think I managed to get that across in the album, both in the writing and the recording of it.
And also the producing. It's the first album, and the first two were produced by legendary producers, and they brought in lots of great musicians. But this is the first album you produced yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, which makes me particularly proud of this one. I couldn't have done it without the previous two albums, because I learned so much from Keith Bessie and then from Warren Bennett. But I thought I would do this one myself, A, because I couldn't really afford to pay anyone else to do it. Because you don't make that
rock and roll. I was so good. I learned so much from these people. I thought I didn't have the dosh. That's
yeah. Well, records don't sell like they used to, so I thought I better try and keep this one to myself.
Right.
But also because of the lockdown situation, I finished it in lockdown. Although I started it at the start of 2019, I think, and I finished it last summer. Yeah, so I managed to finish it during lockdown. So that, it was difficult to collaborate, really. So it was my own baby, and as I say, I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I'm very proud.
And it sounds, but you did manage to collaborate. This is what I love. It's one of those lockdown albums, especially done. People with different. You had Ed Barker on sax. I love the saxophone in it. Lots of talk to me about all the musicians you got involved, because there's quite an interesting collection.
Yeah, I mean, there's basically I would record the songs at home myself, and then I would get a basic form for the songs. But I love the sound of real drums, and my studio at home isn't big enough for real drums. So on the first album, I used a guy called John Howells, and we didn't on the second album because Warren was doing some drumming. So I got John. I went back to John and asked if he'd do it. So he laid the drum tracks down. And then he recommended a bass player that he worked a lot with called Dan Hawkins. And Dan, I tried out a couple of songs with Dan, and he was just amazing. He just played, straight away that the guy, he's got my kind of guide, but then he would just play all these clever bassliney things that I could never do. Excuse me. Ed Barker has played on all my albums. I would ask him before I go to anyone else. He's a incredible saxophone player, a lovely guy, and nearly a member of Parliament, but didn't quite make it at the last election. So they tried hard. Good luck next time, Ed. And the news, what perhaps makes this album stand out different from all the others, is that the inclusion of an electric guitar player called Antoine Saltz, who's a French guitarist, songwriter. And
Pete Townsend loves him. The Who says he's the future of music, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the band that he kind of founded is Saltz with his brother Greg, and we were doing
another great name. This is what I love. This is why you were attracted. The Michael Armstrong debut album, the Saltz album. They do it. The Folds 5. There's a pattern here. What's on? They were slapping on an album.
But no, we were doing some promoting for them, and the first time I heard them, I thought, wow, these guys are really good. I would love to play with them. And so when I did a gig in London last year, no, not last year, must have been the year before, and I asked them if they'd be the band with me. And so I did some rehearsals with them, and we went and they played, and they were just fantastic. And I just said to Antoine, would you mind playing on, I'm writing a new album, would you mind playing on it? So we did that, and his sound really stands out in this album, and I think that's what makes it very different to the last two albums. It's a lot more guitar-y because of that.
And he is an incredible guitar player. I mean, he started at the age of 6, and you just pick things up. And I say, this is why sort of Pete Townsend really loves his stuff. The sound is really quite unique, and it complements the other musicians beautifully as well, which is great. And you couple that with the fantastic writing and the storytelling. And the single, Matters of the Heart, which is coming out. I love the video with that. This is you literally wearing your heart on your sleeve. It's for your mum and dad. You even dedicate it at the video at the beginning. And they've been big inspiration. It looked to me like a collection of little family snaps of the Michael Armstrong life. 50 years of marriage for your parents, brilliant, and little snaps all the way through, you growing up with all sorts of stories. Tell me about that single, Matters of the Heart.
Yeah, it's Matters of Heart rather than Matters of the Heart, but
that's me. Hashtag the out of it, okay.
Yeah. I started writing that song. I see you saying about that song. I came up with the chord progression which starts the song, and immediately I thought I had something quite special. It had a real feeling about it. And initially, I started writing the song about my children, and perhaps telling a story of I was going to leave the song for them, and perhaps make them, when I've gone, this is what will be left to you, kind of thing. And after the first verse, I couldn't sing it. I made me incredibly emotional. I choked up and I just couldn't finish it. And I thought, well, what good is me writing this song if I can never sing it, record it or perform it? So I went back and I started again. And so I turned it on its head and wrote it and started writing about my parents. And the first couple of verses are about my parents. Maybe the third verse is more about me. But it's essentially a song because my parents didn't really have nothing to start with. They're children of the baby boomer period and grew up in Mitcham in South London. And my dad's, as I say, we've worked so hard together, my mum and dad, and been through a lot, especially with us children, and forged out an incredibly successful business and a really great life for themselves and for my brother and I. And they've always supported my music. As I said, they were there at every gig. It didn't matter where it was, even if they were the only ones in the audience. And my dad's, when I was a kid, bought me recording equipment and guitars and everything to make, spent a lot of money, everything to encourage me. And, they're in their 70s now, retired. And I just wanted to write a song for them and say thank you, kind of thing. And so that's what the song was about. We started when I thought I need to get a video for it, and I thought, well, let's illustrate what it's really about. And so the video kind of starts with some photographs of my parents as children, and then as them as in their 20s, I guess, when they met, and then their wedding, and then my brother and I coming along as children. And then there's a section in that with people that have passed, their grandparents. My nan's still with us; she's 100 this year, but the others have gone. Yeah, and some other members of the family. And then it goes to my children and my brother's children, and us growing up throughout the years. So, yeah, it was kind of like a video picture book for them. That's what it's for. I mean, I'm not sure. Everyone else will probably smile because there's some funny pictures of me getting skinny and getting big and getting old and all that kind of thing.
Your face. Who was that with the ice cream on the beach?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah,
it was wonderful. I love it. No, it's brilliant, but you could see it, and you can see the love and the journey, if you like, the journey that you took as an artist. Matters of Heart, no "the" in it. I don't know who put that in. They're always trying to add things, aren't they? You always take out. Who needs these extra words? Matters of Heart, and I love it. Absolutely brilliant. You would normally around this sort of time be touring that album. What are your plans for that?
Oh, geez. I mean, let's look and see what happens. I'm not going to put anything in place for this year. I'm still obviously weary, like we all are, of what exactly is going to happen. I know Boris is talking about 21st of June, but again, this morning on the news, they're talking about more variants and things like that. So I think we need to play it cool. And I'm not sure, even if we were allowed to perform, how many people would be confident of actually going to the venues. I know people are desperate to go out, but how confident people are going to be until perhaps everyone has received the vaccine. So 2022 looks like the year. And I think there's going to be a whole lot of, if all goes according to plan, there's going to be a whole lot of gigs and a whole lot of music and a whole lot of fun out there. We're going to be, we're going to be celebrating like it's 1946 or something.
I reckon you're right, Michael. I reckon it's going to be the Roaring Twenties again, with 100 years on, which is the reason you picked Ojai as the title, celebrating their 100 years. So I reckon you foresaw all of this. And I think that was a glorious moment from those early days of Gary Barlow and the wonderful link throughout your career, from Pebble Mill all the way to performing in front of the Queen, with Paul McCartney all the way. It has been peppered with exciting stories. It has been such a joy having you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Andrew. I really had fun. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I look forward to having you back. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Thank you again to my very special guest, Michael Armstrong. A brilliant single, Matters of Heart, off the album Ojai. 100 years since Ojai was incorporated, 100 years later, and we have the brilliant album. Do look out for that. It's released on the 30th of April this year, and the track, Matters of Heart, is going to be available from the 5th of March. For all of you, thank you very much for joining me. If you'd like to be a guest, you can write to me at guests@octopustv.com. That's guests@octopustv.com. Or if you have comments on any of the guests, it's always great to hear from you. Don't forget, you can follow me at Andrew Eborn @octopustv, and you can subscribe on all of the usual platforms. But for me, for now, thank you for joining me. Thanks again to Michael. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.